Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 5 of our course, where we will be talking about faith, religion, and spirituality and making some connections to our work as clinicians. So, the first reading that we had was on spirituality, suffering, and resilience. So, by the end of this, you should be able to distinguish between spirituality and religion, identify how religion and spirituality dynamics can generate suffering or support resilience, and integrate a spiritually pluralistic stance into family therapy, including assessment, intervention, and ethical decision making. Okay, so Walsh, the author of this chapter, invites us to treat spirituality as integral to the biopsychosocial spiritual system. Think of it like culture. It's always present. Sometimes it's foregrounded by crisis. And in practice, clients often arrive with religious and spiritual questions embedded in grief, illness, trauma, or a relational rupture. So the same religion and spirituality meanings or religious and spiritual meanings that can provide coherence and courage can also intensify pain, especially where doctrines are punitive or identity negating. So our stance as therapists is to be curious, pluralistic, and safety forward. We neither proselytize or pathologize. We ask, we listen, and we co create practices that fit the client's lived faith or secular spirituality. So, what you want to do is offer clients language that validates both of their experiences. So, if you're working with multiple people in the room, some people say I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Others feel most nourished through a congregational life. Uh, yeah, many blend nature, arts, meditation, and social action alongside church, temple, mosque, or synagogue. So, our job is to locate their personal wellspring. What practices restore them? Which communities carry them? What stories make suffering bearable and more love more possible? So you should expect intrafamilial diversity. So within each person, diversity within each person in the system. Grandparents, parents, and teens may orient differently. So they can be devout, they could be questioning, they could be unaffiliated, they could be pluralistic. You want to treat difference as a clinical resource, a chance to surface values, negotiate rituals, and find shared ground. So note that the political climate shapes safety and disclosure. So for examples, Muslim families facing bias, LGBTQ plus clients navigating heterosexist contexts. So your cultural humility is part of therapeutic safety. Spiritual life is braided with culture and power. Think of African American sacred music as a resilience technology, of indigenous rituals connecting youth to life, of immigrant families blending Catholicism and Espiritismo, or our ancestral rites. Sorry, y'all. Your assessments should invite these stories and practices. You want to bring them in respectfully and without exoticizing them. You want to check your own defaults. What are your spiritual or religious beliefs? And are you making assumptions of your clients based on those? So, whose theology, whose ritual, whose moral frame am I centering? So, families are meaning making communities. Rituals organize time and identity. So, Sabbath dinners, Eid, Diwali, baptisms, funerals. They have micro practices that matter too. Brief gratitude prayers, shared breaths before hard talks. Interfaith couples often thrive by foregrounding shared values like compassion, justice, hospitality, while negotiating distinct rituals. End of life care is a sacred zone. Clinicians can scaffold family dialogue, honor rights, and support memorialization with that transforms grief into connection. So you want to screen for spiritual pain. Ask, are there beliefs or teachings that make this harder? Is there any part of your faith that offers comfort or adds pressure or shame? Moral injury warrants careful work. Witnessed, witnessed lament, self-forgiveness, accountability, reparative action, and community reconnection. Where doctrines sanction harm, safety trumps neutrality. We challenge abuse while honoring clients' needs for belonging and meaning. So the literature is robust that prayer, meditation, rituals, congregational support, and services correlate with health and recovery. So the author emphasizes three intertwined processes. Meaning making frames hardship, hope sustains effort, and transcendence enlarges perspective and purpose. These are relational processes. They multiply when practiced together with families and communities. Meaning making is not about silver lining, it's about coherence. Explore the family's causal stories, so divine fate, divine will, fate, karma, curses, envy, anything like that. Validate while gently loosening constricting attributions. So an example here, what if you could say something like, what if this loss isn't punishment and your grief honors the depth of your love? So some tools that you can use, storying practices, letters to the divine or ancestors, multi-generational maps of faith, rupture, repair, so another form of the genogram. Hope is oxygen for the spirit. It's compatible with realism and grief. Invite clients to differentiate outcome hopes from process hopes. We can't change this diagnosis, but we can make this time rich with presence. So that's something that you could say. You want to coach micro practices, something like short prayers or meditation, gratitude rounds, one good thing rituals. So you can, find one good thing from the day, from the whatever. Scheduling respite and naming helpers. Name and normalize oscillation between despair and hope as being healthy. Transcendence widens the frame. We belong to each other. Practices include sacred readings, song, walks in nature, service to others, advocacy against injustice that harmed the family. So forgiveness, when you're chosen but not coerced, can be liberating. So if you choose to forgive, you don't feel coerced to forgive, that can be liberating. Rituals help metabolize rupture into meaning. So you can ask something like, what would honoring these values look like this week? How might you mark this transition? So you want to normalize the conversation, saying something like, I ask everyone about the spiritual part of life because it often shapes how we suffer and how we heal. So that's how you could broach the topic of spirituality, religion, faith. Offer a broad menu. So are you talking about religion, secular spirituality, nature, arts, activism, whatever that meaning is? You want to map fit and friction within the person, between partners, across generations. So where are they on the same page? Where is there friction due to their differing beliefs? Or, there can be fit because there's complementary beliefs. So you want to track turning points, things like moves, losses, illnesses, births. This can be on like a formative timeline that reshaped their faith or practice. So any formative events that reshaped their faith or practice. So when guilt, anger at God, or rupture with community surfaces, slow down and witness. Lament is critical work. For moral injury, help clients tell the truth of what happened, name violated values, seek forgiveness, and design reparative steps, things like letters, service, make amends. Where specialized spiritual care is needed, collaborate with trusted clergy, chaplains, whoever the client chooses while you hold the relational frame. So you're staying in your lane while consulting with or collaborating with people who may have a differing, that perhaps have a differing skill set than you. So, pluralism means many true paths to meaning and goodness. Ethical practice requires both humility and a spine. We do not collude with harm. If doctrine is used to justify abuse or exclusion, we protect the vulnerable and seek safer spiritual homes. You want to be transparent about your role limits and partner with clergy who share safety and dignity commitments. So you want to help couples move from which faith wins to how do our values live in practice. You want to co-create ritual plans, things like holidays, blessings, community service, and child rearing agreements, things like stories, attendance, language around God. You want to coach boundary scripts with extended family, celebrate creative blends, honor distinctiveness without ranking. Grief work is spiritual work. You want to offer options, maybe a home memorial, collective storytelling, writing to the deceased, planting a tree, creating a scholarship or donation, name and normalize faith crises. You'd say something like, many people feel angry with God after such a loss. Explore alternatives to punishment narratives that preserve dignity and love. So here with conversations around faith, your presence is the intervention. Reflect on your upbringing, conversations, conversions, deconversions, and current anchors. Notice countertransference with devout clients, skeptics, or traditions unlike your own. Build trusted relationships across faith so you can consult and refer. Hold your lane. You are a relational healer, not a theologian. Partner, don't preach. So things you could try to practice some of this, just giving you guys an opportunity to like pause the lecture, look at this, and engage in some practice activities. So you could do a 3-minute breath and gratitude right now. Notice your notice your nervous system. You could draft a spiritual genogram or timeline for a composite family or your own. Note turning points and fractures. You could write a brief ritual script, having an opening, intention, action, and closing. The last option, you could journal like moments I felt judgmental or defensive around whoever. So I don't believe any of you are working with clients. So if it's happened in a previous job, if you found it happening in conversations in class or anything like this, moments where you felt defensive, about others' beliefs. This could be in just general interactions and what values of yours were activated. So, key takeaways from this is that spiritual questions are human questions about meaning, belonging, and courage. Your systemic craft helps clients translate belief into healing practices and transform suffering into connection and purpose. So, if you want to, what you can do is write down a couple of concrete changes you'll make in assessment and intervention to better include a spiritual dimension. All right, our next reading, y'all, was Making Privilege and Oppression Happen. So here we will move from abstract definitions to the everyday mechanisms through which privilege gets produced and maintained, and why that matters for couple and family therapy. We'll highlight how discrimination can be explicit or subtle, intentional or unintentional, and why impact matters more than intent. So I'm going to try to connect these ideas to assessment, intervention, and self of the therapist practices. All right. So in CFT, couple and family therapy, symptoms live in relationships nested in larger systems. If we miss the mechanisms that make privilege happen, we risk pathologizing the partner with less social power, over focusing on the protest of the unheard partner, or offering first order tips that leave structural inequities intact. Today, so what I'm going to try to do is give you language and practices that prevent that drift. All right. So prejudice involves learned ideas and feelings about groups. Discrimination refers to behaviors that differentially treat people, intentional or not. Privilege is the unearned advantages and default inclusion afforded to dominant categories. These interact. Prejudice rationalizes discrimination. Repeated discrimination materializes as privilege for some and oppression for others. So, clinically, our focus is on behaviors and processes that produce impact. Discrimination is powerful because it hides in routine procedures. Blind orchestra auditions increase selection of women, removing identity cues, reducing biased filtering. Similarly, small favors like waiving a bus fare is more often extended to white riders than riders of color. No one needs to feel hostile or inequity. No one needs to feel hostile for inequity to be produced. That's why examining processes matters. Implicit bias refers to automatic associations that shape perception outside awareness. You can be committed to equity and still reproduce inequity if procedures rely on snap judgments. So, in session, that can look like giving more time to a higher status partner or coding them as calm or credible. So, you want to build structural checks that interrupt automaticity, just being automatic. Microaggressions are brief messages that communicate devaluation or exclusion. They're often explainable as jokes, curiosity, or compliments. What are you signals otherness. Commenting on bodies or posting sexualized images asserts male privilege by normalizing objectification. Ambiguity keeps targets second guessing, creating cumulative cognitive and emotional load. Okay, so here I want to also offer you like a repair line if this ever happens. You could say something like, I want to check something. Did that comment land as welcoming or excluding? Like something checking what you just said. So oppression is not a single event, it's an accumulation. The momentary sting matters, and so does the long arc. Things like housing access, school quality, safety, and the internalized sense of belonging. Name both the acute injuries and the chronic weather system families live under. Privilege shows up in microsignals: who is greeted, who is ignored, who gets the benefit of the doubt, whose topic sets the agenda. So in therapy, who you sit closest to, whose account you follow up on, whose version you summarize, whose culture is treated as default. So, some concrete expressions include steering in real estate. So, we're talking about racism here, differential lending, school funding tied to property taxes, and racialized policing. Many Black families teach safety scripts for police encounters. Prudence, not catastrophizing. If we read this as, quote, overprotective without context, we misdiagnosed resiliency as pathology. So, something you might ask, given your neighborhood context, what safety practices are important in your family culture? So, gendered oppression includes harassment, sexual violence, and disciplining women's visibility and voice. Heterosexism harms LGBTQ plus folks and straight people by enforcing real man, real woman standards. When a partner pressures the other to stay closeted, or when safety must be negotiated daily, we're not just in communication issues, we're in power. So, something you might say here, let's name the safety and power pieces before we jump to skills. Systems of privilege also cost those positioned as dominant. Men socialized away from intimacy, straight men policed by homophobic insults, white folks navigating moral dissonance and avoidance. So, naming costs isn't to center dominant distress, it clarifies why everyone has a stake in change. So you might use costs to open to not recenter. So you might say something like, what have you lost by needing to be in control? Most systems manage crises rather than change processes. Everyday policies, so who gets intake priority, leniency on no-shows, flexible hours, they recreate advantage. You want to audit your microsystems. Are forms, hours, and rules designed for the already resourced? So some action you might be able to take is propose one structural change that reduces discretion where bias creeps in. Healing metaphors can obscure an essential truth. As long as harm-producing practices continue, individuals cannot heal their way out of fresh injuries. Sustainable change requires relational repair and structural change. So something you might say in therapy, what would need to change out there so the change in here can hold? So assessment you can do, map social identities and decision power. You can tally interruptions, talk time, screen for coercive control privately. An intervention you can use is to structure equal airtime, name unjust defaults neutrally, convert protests into proposals while holding the one-up partner accountable. So in supervision, this might something you might ask for is to notice who you identify with and where bias can enter your conceptualization. So because inequity can be reproduced through us, you want to install interruptions. So use an airtime tally, note your default, like something like I code calm as competent. So recognizing like, hey, if I am pathologizing or moving away from the more emotional person, like ask yourself why that might be. You want to repair out loud when you drift and recruit a peer to review recordings for power drift. So this is what practicum is for. Okay. So here, if you want to, because this is an asynchronous lecture, maybe you can micro audit a mock session or any sort of role play and script a rebalancing line. You can rewrite a non-compliant note as a context-aware plan, or identify one clinic policy that could reduce bias and draft a proposal like I offered earlier. So key takeaways here, discrimination is often procedural. Privilege is enacted in ordinary routines. Microaggressions add up. Everyone has a stake, though not the same price. And clinical change is durable when we also change power arrangements. So some next steps, if you would like to. You can try one interruption tool, add one structured equity practice into like your thought process this week, because again, you may not be working with clients, but just in your interactions, you can complete a brief reflection. When have I unintentionally privileged one voice over another? And what will I do differently next time? And that is it.